Thank you. So welcome. Like Dan said, I'm Kez and this is Joe. And we are carrying on in our series based on this book by Dub Everett, Loving People Towards Jesus. And there are free copies over there if you haven't managed to pick one up and start reading it yet. It is fantastic. I read it about a year ago and was really inspired. So Dave Rogers kicked us off with the word evangelism, what that means, and that Jesus, before he went back to his Father in heaven, he told the disciples, go and make more disciples. There was that commandment to do that. So that was looking at the word evangelism. And then Hugh, last week, I think, looked at prayer and the fact that it's really, really important to talk to God about our friends before we talk to our friends about God. And he challenged all of us to pick 3 people, 3 friends to pray for every day for 30 days. Encouraging you to keep going with that. Just like Michael said, keep going, even if you don't even see your friends. And today we are looking at Meet the Family is the title of this preach, really. So we're looking at community side of things. But first of all, bit of an interactive bit, if that's okay. Is that okay? Thumbs up? Yeah, awesome. So, question for you all. When have you felt, I think they're on the screen, when have you felt a real sense of belonging? Let's have a think. And what helped you to feel like you really belonged? I want you to chat to the person next to you, behind you, the people around you, in pairs or small groups. Go. Okay, cool. Can I ask someone from this section over here, just a quick, snappy, the second part of our section, what helped you to feel like you really belonged? Someone from this side, shout it out. Knowing your name, excellent. Someone from the middle? Shared interests, excellent. Someone from this side? Serving together, amazing. Someone from the back on the blue bleachers. Feeling loved, excellent. Any more from anywhere? Shout them out. Yeah, amazing. Pardon? Actions, excellent. I'm going to pause there. We've probably got loads more. That's amazing. People are built for community. And you might find this through various clubs. I know Nay's part of an amazing choir. There's people part of bands, art clubs, toddler groups make you feel like you belong. There's lots of sports, so many different ones. One thing that sprung to mind when I was thinking about this was, I don't know who's watched Race Across the World. Yeah, it's amazing. I want to go travelling, but it's my only way to travel at the moment, so I watch that. And basically, I'm struck by the fact that the partners that do the race, it's really actually when they meet the locals and the locals invite them into their home, have their local food, chat, the family's running round, they get stuck in with the work that family do. And that's really the turning point in their journey where they're like, that really meant something. I really felt part of that group of people for that 24 hours. Over to you.
And that sense of belonging is something we talk about a lot at school. So some of you will go to school, some of you might work in schools, but the last couple of years, there's been a massive emphasis, especially since the COVID pandemic, on like how can we help children feel like they belong in school? I don't know if you know, like attendance at school dropped quite a lot after COVID. And I honestly, if I had £1, maybe you're the same if you work in a school, if I had £1 for every time someone had talked about belonging, or we'd had like a staff training thing on belonging in the last 5 years, like I would be a rich person. Because there's that big question, like how do we feel like we belong? And we want to belong, right? Through all those things. We join groups to feel like we belong. You might be part of a sports team or a choir or a band or an orchestra. You might go to a toddler group or an art class or loads of different things. And we want to feel like we belong in community. And for us as Christians, like that's not a surprise. because we believe right in the beginning, if you go back to the first book of the Bible in Genesis, God said, let us make humankind in our image. And so we're relational in the same way that God is relational. It says in Genesis chapter 2, after God made Adam, he said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I'm going to make him a partner. And so he didn't leave the man alone. And we know it's not good to be alone, right? There's been loads of studies recently, especially since the COVID pandemic, linking physical and mental decline to loneliness as well. There was one article in The Guardian about a loneliness epidemic, which might be up there. I remember sitting in another training thing at school where someone talked about a Harvard study that said the best indicator of how long someone lived was how many meaningful relationships they have, like how many connections we have. And to some degree, at some point, we've probably all experienced feeling loneliness. Some of us perhaps more than others. Some of you this morning might feel alone, might feel like you're not connected or in community, or like we lack relationships. But God's heart for us, it says in Psalm 68, is to set the lonely in a family, or in another translation, to set the solitary person in a home. That's what God's heart is all about. And he's always chosen and wanted to bring a people to himself. So in the Old Testament, he chose the Jewish nation and wanted to bring them together as a community to show the world how his kind of community worked. And then Jesus, when he came, didn't come as some preacher who gave amazing talks and then withdrew to always be by himself and was really hard to get at and like an individual teacher just going around. He spent time in community, particularly with his 12 disciples, Peter, James, and John, the three in particular he was close with, and then also the other group that he traveled around with. There's a bit in the Bible where it says he sent out 72 disciples, and lots of those were probably traveling around with Jesus as well. And then when Jesus died and rose and ascended back to heaven, he called and commanded his disciples to go and share the gospel and make disciples of all nations. And in doing so, they started churches, and so the early church began. God's people, his special possession. It says in 1 Peter, he wanted the church to be a holy nation, a royal priesthood, a people of his own possession. So that early church community gives us a really good sense of what is so special about the church. So Kez, over to you.
If we could all turn to our Bibles, it's Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. So Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need, and every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So that Bible passage there lists quite a few things that this early church were doing. So could you just be brave and shout out what you've noticed? What do those Christians, what were they committed to doing and devoted to? Praying, yeah, definitely. Meeting daily, so really regularly. Yes, sharing food and possessions. They weren't oh no, that's mine. They held everything really, really lightly and were generous with it. They didn't really see things as like theirs and theirs only. Yeah, Brill, anything else? Yes, meeting each other's needs. So they must have really had their eyes open to what was going on around them, who was in need, what was the need, and then not just thinking, I'm not going to do anything. They were actively then meeting those needs. Anything else? Yes, lots of signs, lots of wonders. Exactly. Breaking bread. Yep. So having communion, that's when we look back at what Jesus has done for us by breaking bread and drinking wine. And that means we experience his salvation in the present moment. And we look forward to him returning again. So they were having communion like that regularly to remember those things. There was fellowship as well. Joe and I Googled fellowship because sometimes it's just a bit of a word, and I'm like, what does that actually mean? So I found this really helpful. It comes from the Greek word koinonia, which signifies a deep connection and partnership amongst believers. So the believers weren't just individuals practicing their faith in isolation, but they were part of a vibrant community that supported and uplifted one another. It encompasses shared interests, mutual support, that collective commitment to the teachings of Jesus, and the unity was essential and is essential for spiritual growth and community strength. And fellowship isn't really limited to social gatherings, but it's fundamentally about being in communion with God and one another. I think we've got them all. Oh no, there's one more that I really like. It's eating together. They constantly ate together. And that's actually a highlight of my children. Whenever they're like, community group, yay, we get to have loads of lovely food. So that's important part too. So as they were doing all of these things, practicing these habits, living out these habits, they had glad and sincere hearts, which is verse 46. And there was a sense at the awe at the wonders and signs being done through the apostles. And the church community enjoyed the favour of all people. So it had a really, 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 really good reputation amongst everyone around them. A few hundred years on, I think, it was just really, really countercultural, the early church, the way they were living. It gave dignity to people like women, children, the poor, the sick. They showed real compassion. And actually, a few hundred years later, there was a Roman emperor, Julian, and he noted what the church community were doing, their compassion, their love, that even in plagues, they were risking their lives by still seeing the sick, witnessing to the sick, that he was challenging his own Romans. Like, why are you not doing that? Even the Christians are showing it to the Roman people. Come on, guys. So, it was really countercultural and was noted by Roman emperors. Down there. So, first application to think about, questions to consider. Number one, so maybe you are really new to church and you're really, really welcome and it's lovely to have you. And you might not have ever thought about church in this way. It might have just been, you go on a Sunday and worship God and learn about him. But maybe you've never considered the idea that God is passionate about community and it is at the heart of the Christian faith. So what do you think about that? Joe and I and other people here would just encourage you to test it out. So if you're new, we have smaller groups called community groups. We'd just love you to test it out. And if you'd like to get connected and meet a few new people in a smaller environment, there's Connect cards and you can speak to one of the leaders here and we can connect you with a group just to test it out. What's it about? What's it like? That would be amazing.
That's you. Just feel free to head over to the Connect point at the end. We'd love to chat and be really happy to do so as well. Secondly, it might be that you read that and it sounds like an amazing picture of community, right? It sounds quite idyllic in some ways, and it says they had glad and sincere hearts, and it sounds amazing. But you might read that and think that your experience of church community is just a million miles away from that. Or you might have had a bad experience, particularly in church community in the past. You might be feeling hurt. You might feel like that's definitely not your experience of church community at the moment. And if that's you, like, first of all, I'd say that's probably not just you. Okay, I guarantee and know what it feels like to have been hurt. And we're not going to pretend that our church community is perfect. Like, we're not going to say that you're never going to get hurt, and we're going to 100% of the time have glad and sincere hearts. Sorry. But that's not to take away, like, if you've had a bad experience. Like, we want to acknowledge that and recognize that we live in a broken world, and we're still not perfect people. But Jesus' intention, what I would say, his intention is that his people do experience something like this. Jesus' heart for his community, for the church, is that we can know those deep connections where everyone is able to flourish, and where we are joined together with other people. And it's not perfect, but together Jesus is present, and we're able to follow him together and enjoy that community and connection to him. And then lastly, a number of us will consider ourselves part of Grace Church. And there's a challenge here for us, right? And the challenge is this. Do you value the church like Jesus does? And when I say the church, I don't just mean the concept of church. A guy called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of my heroes in history, he said it's really easy to like idealize community and like love the idea of community. And he says God doesn't ask us to love the idea of community. He'll ask us to love people and the people around us. So if you're part of Grace Church, like, look around the people around you in the room. Like, do you value and love those people? Because we're not called to create community. Like, Jesus has already made the community. It talks in the Bible about how he's knit a people together, how he is the head of the body. So he's done that. We don't need to create a community. Like, we're called then to love people in Jesus' community. It describes the church as Jesus' bride. Like, he loved us so much that he gave himself for us, and he nourishes us, and he cherishes us. So how do you feel about God's people? Because if we're going to talk in a minute about loving people into community, like, if we don't love our community in the first place, there's kind of not much to welcome people into. So how committed are you to your church family? How committed are you to all those things we just shouted out, listed in Acts 2, to loving your brothers and sisters closer to Jesus together? We'll just think about that for a second. Whilst we do that, I would love 4 or 5, well, how many do I want? 5 volunteers. Can I have 5 volunteers? Otherwise, I'm just going to pick people. Any volunteers from over here?
You're not going to have to say it.
Yes, Lydia, come up. And was that Johnny as well? Johnny and Lydia, that's 2. Let's have a couple representing the middle. Some of the youth. Yeah, Ezra. Oh, Ezra's been volunteered. Sorry, Ezra. Come up. That's 3. Someone in the middle. Thanks, Mark. That's 4. And someone from over this side. Yeah, thanks, Susie. Brilliant. Right. Guys, if you could come here so people can see you. I would like you to all link arms and make a circle and face inwards. So we talked about the church community and being united together. I've shamelessly stolen this from one of my friends. And they are united together in community. Okay, and you can see that with these strong bonds. They've been brought together. Okay, but they are currently inward looking. And as they're inward looking, they're just getting quite introspective and focusing on each other. So Ezra looks at Susie and thinks, oh, Susie's face looks a bit funny there. Like, I'm not sure what that's all about. And then Susie's staring at Johnny, and she's like, Johnny, I like the beard, but could you do this? Like, maybe there's something you could do slightly differently with it. And Johnny's looking at Mark's top, and he's like, well, it's quite a nice top, Mark, but you've got like a mark on it. Like, has Benaiah sort of been sick on it? Or I don't know. Like, and they're just looking inwards at each other, and they're getting quite introspective. Guys, can you now turn around and link arms? And so now, this is not a perfect analogy. It's not in the Bible. The bonds are still here, but instead of noticing every little thing about each other and like just being introspective, they're now outward focused. And they're able to see what's going on around them and then do something about it. But they're still united, like these bonds are still strong and they're joined together. But instead of looking inwards, they are looking outwards. Can we give our volunteers a round of applause? Thanks, guys. Good job.
Am I right? Yeah.
So, hang on. What was the point? So it said in Acts chapter 2 at the end, in verse 47, the Lord was adding daily to the people being saved. The whole point of the church community is that more people are welcomed into it. Like, that's what God has always been about. He's always been outward looking. Okay, in the Old we read, even in like the laws in the Old Testament, there's stuff about when people from outside the house of Israel like join, like how that works. And there was always the idea that people would be added. People are saved into a community. And salvation isn't just an individual thing. Like, it is an individual thing. We often think about it in those terms. So I've sinned against God. I need his forgiveness. And Jesus died to pay the price for my sin so that my debt is paid and he credits righteousness to me. And so I can be in heaven with him for eternity. That is true. But there is a communal thing as well. Like, it's not just the group of individuals who've been saved by Jesus. The passage in Acts shows us the whole point of it is that people are added to a family, and God is creating a family for himself.
So if being in God's community is so good for you and good for us, and knowing Jesus is so important, it isn't surprising that we want that for the people that we know and care about. It isn't surprising that we think, oh, I really want my friend to know Jesus, that burning desire when you're like, oh, your heart breaks for them. It's not surprising we feel like that. So that's why we're doing this whole series in loving people towards Jesus, and to really kind of put it to the forefront of our minds. So we've said that to love people towards Jesus, we, number one, can love people practically by sharing our lives. Number two, we can love people into community by sharing our friends. And the third one is love people towards Jesus by sharing an invite. And today we really are focusing on that. Number two, loving people into community by sharing our friends.
We'll talk more in future weeks about loving people towards Jesus by sharing an invite as well. But how do we love people into community? For the next 10 minutes or so, we just want to share some stories and hopefully provoke us to think about how can we practically do that? How can we love people into our community, and how can we ensure that more people get to experience God's love as part of his people as well? I want to tell you a little bit about my mum and dad. So when I was born is Ian still in here? I grew up quite close to Ian, actually. We think we played football against each other when we were in sixth form. So in Kent, in Orpington, and we grew up not going to church. So my mum and dad didn't go. My dad, I think, had gone to church and might have called himself a Christian, but my mum had never really been to church. But we grew up in a road just down from a church. And when I was about 3 or 4, I went to the play group at the church, and my mum and dad got to know a couple of families who went to the church through that. And then one day, Crofton Baptist Church I grew up in, had a fun day, and so my parents went along to this fun day. I think there was like a barbecue, maybe some kids' activities, bouncy castle, that kind of thing. And one of my school friends, her parents went to the church as well, and they sort of knew my mum and dad. I think they might have invited them along, and they went to this fun day. And then I think the next day, my mum and dad went to the service on the Sunday, and we started going to the Sunday school groups. And that continued. And then 3 years later, my parents both got baptized. And I vaguely remember that when I was about 8 years old. And going to the church was, when they went, it was made easier by the fact that they already knew a few people there, because like my friend at school, they knew her parents, from the school gate, the play group. They'd been to the fun day and met some other people there. And so when they went into the church service, which can be quite an intimidating thing, right? Especially if you've never experienced it before, it was made easier by the fact that they already knew some people there. And in his book, there's some great stuff. Like, I definitely recommend reading this if you haven't already. It is very easy to read. And Dub Everett in his book talks about the importance of meeting more than one Christian. It says in the Bible, God has poured his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us, in Romans chapter 5. And the Holy Spirit produces fruit in our lives, fruit such as love and joy and kindness. So if you're a Christian, your friends might well see you as loving and joyful and kind, but they might not connect that to the fact that you're following Jesus. Like, that could just be a coincidence. Like, Kez is loving, joyful, and kind, maybe just because she's Kez, and she's like that, okay? And then she happens to be a Christian as well. But if you meet lots of people who are following Jesus, and all of those people are loving and joyful and kind, then it's far less likely to just be a coincidence. Maybe there's some correlation between being saved and knowing Jesus and following him, and being loving and joyful and kind because of the fruit the Spirit produces in our lives. I'm hoping there's going to be a picture of the night sky. Yep. So you can just about see in the night sky, there is one star shining in the sky. So I want you to imagine maybe you're camping in a field in South Devon in the last weekend in August. If you haven't signed up for the church weekend away, that's when it is. Come along. Maybe you're camping in Devon, you look up at the night sky, and there's one star, and you go, that's a great star shining in the sky. But then, imagine if you see the sky full of stars. I don't know how it's going to work in here. So the sky full of stars, when you're out in the countryside and there's no sort of man-made light, it creates a huge impact compared to just one star. Like, one star people notice, but many have infinitely more impact. And in the same way as one Christian might shine as the light of the world, a group of Christians, a family of Christians together, do so infinitely more. And so what happens is that when someone gains new Christian friends and experiences more of God's love towards them and through his church, and are drawn to him and wanting to find out more about that God. In his book, Dub Everett talks about it being relational momentum, that phrase. As we do that, sorry, wrong page. As we do that, people begin to get these three things. They might have a friend who acts like Jesus, but then you get relationships with other Christians who you might enjoy hanging out with and who make you feel like you belong. And then the third thing that's needed is a come-as-you-are, like, learning environment. So we've run, like, the 3-2-1 course, Christianity Explored, a chance to find out about the way of Jesus. And he talks about this as, like, relational momentum. And so we want to think for the last 5 minutes, like, how can we help build towards that? That story I shared about my parents, and you might have other similar stories. Like, what does it look like for us to help other people experience God's love, and how can we practically do that?
Sorry, our notes are all higgledy-piggledy. We adjusted the order last night. We wanted to share an example of what Joe and I did maybe about 10 years ago. We joined Grace Church, a part of Grace Church, with another couple who are very, very good friends. And to try this relational momentum, getting to know people together outside of church, we decided to join an Exeter Musical Society, which 3 out of the 4 of us are really happy about. Our friend wasn't so, was he? But he did it anyway. And
some people thought I was the one. Like,
he loves it.
I actually did performance studies A level. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. And anyway, through doing loads of rehearsals, loads of shows, we really did get to know people really, really well. One of those people has done an Alpha course. She did an Alpha course last year. Another one of those friends is really, really plugged into our current community group as they've both come to carol services. And actually, the carol services, thinking about it, felt a bit like an EMS social. It's like, should we all go? And, you're all singing and dancing together. And it was just much easier for them to come to carol services because they didn't know just the four of us that did the musical society, but they had got to know our friends through church, through other things as well. So, walking into a carol service wasn't such a big deal because they could recognise lots of faces already. And it is encouraging to see that, we are talking about 10 years on, that now those people recently have done an Alpha course and one is really interested in coming to the 321. So, that's an example of sort of doing a club or society together to build up that relational momentum.
Yeah, Michael spoke earlier about like God's economy and God's timing. I think it was 14 years ago we did that first show, and just last year, one of our friends who we're still good friends with started coming along to our community group as well, which is great. And so speaking about our community group, are Ian and Sophie here? I can't, somewhere maybe. Oh, there's Sophie. Sorry, Sophie. About 18 months ago, we started a new group with Ian and Sophie. We needed some more new community groups as a church. Our groups were quite full. We're growing, which is great. And so we sort of started a group which we did a little bit differently. So we knew we wanted to be outward looking. We knew we wanted to be intentional in doing that. We knew we wanted to have our kids involved, if possible, as well. And so, slightly different to what we'd done before, which was to meet in the evening. We decided to meet at 5 o'clock. So we meet every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Different people host each week. We always have food, as Kez said. Our children, the kids all love the food, so do the adults. We do it regularly, and we want to try and invite people into that as well. We mentioned one friend who's come along. There's no kind of really overt prayer or Bible study within that time. We try and say grace before we eat. So we do that, and we try and make space to have conversations. As a group, we try and meet at other times as well where we can look at the Bible and pray for each other too. But our main aim there is can we create a space where we're happy to invite people in and just enjoy hanging out together? And so we mentioned one of our friends come along. Quite a few of our neighbours have come along when we've hosted as well. Which has been great, and some of them have then come to glow parties or to the carol service, and when they have, it's great because they already know some people there. Again, it's not like you then come to a carol service and know just me, but you come to the carol service and they know Ian and Sophie or Baz and Rach or Matt and Alice or whoever from our group as well. Which is fantastic. And I think as well, to parents with kids still at home, loving people towards Jesus is really powerful for our children to witness and to be involved with as well. I picked Jemima up from nursery the other day, and her nursery teacher said she'd been telling her all about community group. So they really enjoy that, and it's powerful for our kids as well. Oh, yes, we are doing that bit.
We wanted to say quickly that some of us might feel like inviting people, we can do that, but actually there's lots of different roles that we can all play. We're all good at different things. So just an example of that, a friend, a neighbour came along to community group. I think Joe was with another child, and I was chatting to somebody else. So one of our community group members just cracked on and just went and cooked the pizzas, really practical, or they would just, join in with the tidying up. It feels very, very like a family. Everyone's chipping in. There's another guy who's just extremely welcoming and chatty, excellent at talking to the children as well, involving them, and a few people in the group are just excellent listeners. So I'm usually just running around like a headless chicken, to be honest. But the other people are so good at chatting, supporting, listening. So, just feel like you all have an individual role to play in it. So not to feel like, I didn't bring anyone. It doesn't matter. We're a family, and we're all there, and we're all important and bring something important to the group. just a bit on inviting people. I used to be such a shy person, and I do believe that, like, if you just kind of go for it, it'll come. So a bit of practice, just go for it. You can be really intentional with your invites. So like we've said, talk to God about your friends before you talk to them about God. So you can ask God, is there anybody that an invite would be super timely and important for them right now. So an example of that is I asked God, and I really felt a real pull to one of my neighbours. And actually she's been coming. She's now part of the community WhatsApp group. She's come to 321 now. And yeah, she's regularly involved. But on the flip side of that, don't feel like, oh, I haven't really heard from God about anyone, so I'll just leave it. I was walking home with a mum from school and found out she'd been solo parenting since the weekend, and was pretty tired. So I said, oh, do you know what? We're having pizzas in an hour. Pop over. And she was just over the moon. And she came, got stuck in, and that's happened a couple of times. An hour later. And another example quickly would be, I think we were having hot dogs, and the neighbours over the road had a really busy week. They weren't quite sure what they were doing for dinner. It was a nice day, so we were kind of all outside. We're very fortunate that there's space outside the houses to play for the kids. So we were out there with community group. They were sort of just about to go to Sainsbury's to buy something for dinner. So we said, just come, just have some hot dogs. We had loads, and at the end of that, the neighbour was like, wow, thank you so much for this hospitality. This has been amazing. So you can be really impromptu as well. So that sort of flip side of, yes, intentional, but also, see what happens the hour or the moment beforehand as well. Yeah.
So we just like to encourage everyone to think about what we could do to bring our friends together. And that will be different for different people, like we're all in different stages. Sometimes some of you might think this is just too much for me to think about at the moment, like don't worry about that. That's okay. But for now or the future, like how could we bring our friends together? Some of the things we've done in church is start groups around common interest. We've got the craft nights that are going on with Em and Emma and Nay and others. Monday football has been started. We've got Ukrainian language groups. Friday hangouts for the youth, like people coming along to that and then coming along to Youth Alpha on a Sunday. So one thing we could do perhaps is starting those groups. Maybe you're like, oh, I really like, I really like reading. I'd like to start a book club and invite some others along to that with some others from church. That's one thing you could do.
You could also just get involved, like we've briefly mentioned, in societies and clubs that are already happening. Just a quick example is that I'm part of a choir, and David and Jenna and Beth and Sarah have all been part of that choir together, and that feels really missional because you look around, you're like, there's, about 5 people from church here too, and a couple of neighbours have now joined that choir who aren't part of a church, and then there's a couple of neighbours who are part of another church who are also part of the same choir now. So you just see the momentum building from different areas. Running clubs. Joe's part of a running club with some others from church as well on a regular basis. Or it might be there's an occasion coming up, like the Football World Cup. Gather friends from church and friends from outside to do that together, sort of making the most of every opportunity. Birthdays, barbecues in the summer, Wimbledon. There's lots of different events that, rather than just sort of chilling out on your own, which is totally fine as well, because we can't do this all the time. But are there moments in the calendar that you're like, oh, that would be a good one where I could mix some friends and share our friends in that way?
So lots of different ideas. Do have a read of the book and take time to think about that yourself as well. But just as we finish now, just a couple of things to bring us back to what this is all about as well. There's a couple of dangers with this. One is that we kind of over-strategize and over-plan and make it all about what we do. We need to remember, it's God who makes things happen. And sometimes he makes things happen out of the blue. I think about one friend who was baptized about 7 years ago or something in church who literally just turned up at church on a Sunday and was baptized in 3 months later. There's sometimes God just makes things happen out of the blue, but it is good to be intentional as well. Like saying God does the work doesn't mean like we just sort of sit back and do nothing. And a helpful way to understand that is a story about our Taybury plant in our garden. I am not a massive gardener, but a few years ago we bought this Taybury plant, which looked a little bit like that. And obviously we don't make that Taybury plant go, right? God is the one who makes stuff grow. But initially, when we got the Taybury plant, we just popped it in the ground and just left it there. There was a bit of me was like, it would be good to put a trellis on the wall behind it, on the assumption that I have faith it's going to get bigger. But I didn't do that initially because I just couldn't be bothered. And as Kez will tell you, my DIY skills are not amazing, even just putting a trellis on a wall. However, eventually, we're like, no, we need to put up the trellis. And so we put up the supporting trellis, and that helped the Taybury plant get to the size it is now. And this year we've got loads of Tayburys, which is amazing. It's God who makes things grow, but he invites us to join in with that, like to put frameworks in place like a trellis, to water. Paul talks in the New Testament about how sowing a seed and watering it, like we can play our parts in that. Our prayers are a vital part in that, talking to God about our friends, telling him what we want to do and what we want to see happen. And therefore, we had the dignity, we had the joy of being involved in what God is doing as we do this together. Kez is going to finish with, there's a little quote from Dub Everett's book, which I think just sums this up really nicely.
So Dub Everett writes, as we help people in our lives find connections with other Christians, they will be experiencing relational momentum too, which is the doorway that God so regularly uses to instigate spiritual momentum. When this happens, we will begin to see God do what only God can do, touch hearts and change lives right before our eyes, which is the most precious thing on earth.
So I wonder if we could just stand together and we'll take a moment to pray.